I'll press record, so we're now recording. I share my screen. It should be. Well, we're delighted to have the maestro, Mr. Kellner, with us today. Hello, Steve. How are you?
Great. Good to see
Thank you for joining in this weird chat debate that seems to be taking all four corners of the world and from strength to strength in the Salvation Army world. It's very nice that you've been able to find time in your busy schedule to come and talk about the counter composition and music and your inspirations. So what I'd like to know is, where did it all start for you?
You mean writing music or just?
Yeah, do you
I
come from the
don't know.
Salvation Army background? I mean, apart
Yes, I
from
absolutely
the
did.
bios online,
Yeah,
you know,
my folks are officers or retired officers now, and they went. I was maybe 2.5 years old when they went to training, so I do predate their. I'm
mhm,
the oldest kid. Um, so I grew up in a musical household, of course, and my dad is a composer, as you may know, has written, some published songs like All for Thee and some of that. And in
mhm,
our territory, Southern Territory, USA, he was kind of he might have been one of the only published composers in the 60s and 70s in our territory. Back then, we didn't have so many folks writing. Probably one of the first officers to have a music degree as well back then.
yeah,
So, and he was stationed at training college, so he did all the training college groups and he wrote musicals, and wherever he was, he kind of wrote and conducted and all that kind of thing. And my mother's very musical as well, and my sister's actually, and we kind of musical family going back even before my dad's. He's from a big family, 9 kids,
ooh, wow,
so big sort of built-in Salvation Army band family, kind of open air ring on their own kind of thing, right?
uh,
Literally, they had an open air chariot. This very old army. So that's what I came up in, and then after high school, my folks actually went on missionary service. Then I went to school for about a year, but then dropped out, got married very young. I went started a music degree, and then after a couple of years, I joined the military music program, U.S. Army, and that kind of led from one thing to another. I started down at the very bottom, kind of in a combat division band, kind of a euphonium
mhm,
in one hand and a rifle in the other, kind of group. And then I went to kind of an intermediate band that was in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where our THQ is. And then in 1987, I joined the Marine Band in Washington,
really? Oh, interesting.
um, which is a really great place to work, of course. And then I eventually ended up being the principal euphonium
Hmm.
in the Marine Band. So I spent a little less than 25 years doing that. So pretty much all my 20s and 30s and half my 40s. But it's kind of a young man's game, as you probably know. So
Yes.
uh, at a certain point, you get too old to. In fact, my last gig in the Marine Band was Ronald Reagan's funeral, which was a street parade in Washington in
Okay.
June. It was about 100 degrees,
Phew.
and I remember thinking to myself, "Man, I think I'm retiring just in time. I don't think I can do any more of these." Yeah.
So that,
And then I went to school with some GI Bill money. We have this sort of, if you're in the service, you have
yes, yeah,
money.
they can. Yes, I know.
Right. I had never finished my bachelor's degree, believe it or not, mainly because I couldn't do some of the coursework that took place in the morning while I was working, all that kind of thing, and touring with the Marine Band. So I finished a bachelor's degree actually in trombone, and then I had some money left over, so I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just kept going and did a master's and a doctorate at Catholic University, which is in Washington, D.C. And then towards the end of that, I guess I'm kind of rambling on here, but
No, it's interesting because
I
it's
was
part of your
actually out.
DNA.
Yeah, we were away from the Army, my wife and my family and I, for about 15 years. Um, and we were Methodist. And during that time, actually, is when I started writing because they had a praise band. And
Mm.
this, you'll know what I'm talking about as a Salvationist. You know, if you're a bandsman, you don't really know what it's like to sit out in the congregation. I mean, like for 2 years in our new church when we left the Army, it's a wonderful church, kind of it was a Methodist church, but it kind of ran like a non-denominational. We were in a gym and
Mm.
lots of people, lots of new converts, really a great atmosphere. And I had never been in a church where they did contemporary music. I'd never not been involved in doing the music, and
Hmm.
I didn't know how to do that. The only way I know how to worship is to actually
Oh, the
participate,
instrument, yeah,
sing and play, and
yeah.
whatever. So after they had some guys up there playing horns, I thought, man, I was a big horn rock band fan when I was a kid, Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears and all that. I thought maybe I could write some charts, and that's actually how I started. I was probably about 40 before I wrote really a note of. I'm 61 now, and
You don't look it.
yeah. So anyway, that's kind of how that started, and then I was involved with a brass group that was not an army group, a Christian professional brass ensemble, like orchestral brass, called Dominion Brass. Started
Yes, I
writing,
found a recording of this.
right? Started writing some stuff for them, more like. Actually, they sounded a lot like Salvation Army pieces. In fact, people in the group would say to me, "These sound like brass band pieces," and I'm like, "Well, that's kind of all I know." And then towards the end of my doctorate work, James Anderson from Scotland, who came over and is
Yeah,
now
very,
departed.
very well known name. Yes.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful man. He asked me to sit in with the National Capital Band. They had lost a couple of their euphonium players, and I wasn't a soldier or anything. I was, and because it was Jim, and because I knew he was already sick, I did it because when
Mm.
Jim tells you something, it's almost like here.
I'll take your word for it. I know
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
a wonderful composer sadly no longer with us, but
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yeah. So I did it for a year, and really that sort of started my kind of return to the Army. And at the end of that year, uh, Jim was really sick then and had decided to retire. And he told the DC that he would like me to take over the band, which is really funny because I wasn't even attending a corps at the time. So that was about 10 years ago. Then since then, I've been writing a lot more for brass
Hmm.
band of various sizes, and that's kind of how I got into
Yeah,
it.
it's interesting 'cause from your conversation, it's very interesting that you are through the military and through the bands and through the music exposed to a lot of different styles of music, even though you may
Yes.
only be playing. And I mean, even from a British point of view, when you see American military bands and the President's Own Band, it's absolutely on point all the time. It's
Yeah.
absolutely, there's no leeway for let's go this way. You're absolutely, on the white line at all times.
Yeah,
So,
that's
and the
true.
music has to be, really superlative quality. So it's very interesting to hear that you had that outside experience that comes to nurture when you came back to the army.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I find it really interesting that someone like James Anderson, whose name is synonymous with quality and Christianity,
Yes.
saw something and you said, no, you're not sitting on the sidelines. Get back in here. I need
Yeah.
your help.
He yeah, he's a very persuasive. He didn't really even push it. He was just Jim.
Yeah.
If you're, I always say to people, Jim was not the kind, if you were kind of not quite right, let's just say, you were struggling, maybe you had sort of strayed from the Lord or whatever. Jim was not the kind of guy you wanted to be around. And he didn't really even have to say anything to you. It just, something came off of him because he was so dead center with the Lord all the time.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just, you either were attracted to it and wanted to get better and get back on track, or you were repelled. And I wasn't off track with the Lord when I came back, but I guess you could say I was off track with the Army, maybe in a way.
Yeah.
I wasn't mad at the Army or anything. That was
No.
do
Yeah.
with that. But just being around Jim was very inspirational. On top of the fact that the guy had stage 4 cancer and was up there, you know,
Yeah.
he
Doing his
would lead a
best.
rehearsal on Monday night and Tuesday have to be off and flat on his back just to,
Yeah. It
just to
takes it out
recover
of you.
from it. Yeah.
So when you started sort of going back into and thinking, I want to start writing these scores and experimenting, was it a pen and paper job? Because within the last few years, the ability to have Sibelius or Finale or this technical ability isn't a hindrance. It's kind of, were you sort of pen and papering as you improvised? Or
No, it's you're very perceptive because actually I would say without Finale software, it's possible I would have never written anything because I didn't really have I don't know if it's the
even with your
patience.
exposure to all this different kind of music,
Yeah, I had it kind of
but
in me, and when I was in the U.S. Army band program, I played a lot of trombone, a lot of big band, quintet, really but not more than just you. When I got to the Marine band, it was much more one thing.
yeah,
Although once in a while on a recital series and stuff, play other stuff. But so I kind of had it in me, but I just, the whole laborious thing of doing a sketch score, which is what everybody used to do, and some people still do it. Like maybe a 3-staff or 4-staff sketch, and then scoring it out. And then
hmm
if something wasn't quite right, it was super hard to change because you already, of course, where I had to do all the parts by hand. So after you'd done the score, you were only maybe 10% done. I only did maybe a couple of things like that way back, transcription things, um, years ago, and it was sort of like pulling teeth. But my kids, I don't remember if I asked them or they just. I think I was talking about writing these brass charts, these horn charts for praise band at this Methodist church, and my kids bought me maybe for birthday or Christmas Finale 97 or
all the
95,
temptation.
whatever it was. Okay,
Yeah,
and it actually sat in the box for months. I didn't even download.
yeah,
Back in those days, it was floppy disk and all that kind
yeah.
of thing. Finally, because I wanted to write these charts, I downloaded, and of course, it's a very laborious kind of learning curve with this software,
Yeah,
especially back then. But I persevered because I really want, and that's kind of how I learned how to use Finale. And then once I kind of figured out, well, this is better for me anyway because it looks nice and you can hear it back, which is I'm
hmm
not the kind of guy. I'm not a Jim Curnow or Ray Stebbin Allen who can just look at something and they just know that's right and it's going to be fine.
hmm
It helps me. Most of the time I'm more or less right, but there's maybe a couple of things that I need to revisit, and Finale is unbeatable for that, or
yeah,
Sibelius, whatever you want to use. So
yeah. Interesting. I mean, bearing in mind that you've been in the position where the music has been almost kind of given the official stamp that it's being done for such a high class audience and that the music has to be absolutely perfect before it gets to the bands and choirs that you've been
right,
involved in. So you've sat in the most, you know, outside the White House, Washington DC National Capital Band. You've played with some of the most elite players probably in the United States in the past. By being in the president's and by being in
right,
the military bands, by the time the music gets to the stands, it's a case of these have to be perfect. So
yeah,
did that help educate? So when you are a player, when you're looking at music, you've got all this case of hang on a minute, I've seen this before, and this could be better than this because you have
yeah,
been exposed to that kind of music.
yeah. I would say that probably. I mean, I think it was maybe even built in before. My dad is he's a very disciplined perfectionist um, type person and writer, and he, I guess we might, a family kind of thing that we have in our family is, I don't know if it's good or bad. When you put your name on something, you want it to be, maybe it's this fear of embarrassment, which
Yeah,
I
possibly.
personally am not opposed to this. This is the way I've always treated my playing too. I don't want to let down my team and my colleagues.
Yeah.
I want to do my part, and whatever preparation it takes
hmm
to do that. And that's kind of the way. Now, you're limited by whatever talent you have. You can't make it better than than you have in you. But as far as the craft goes, you can work at it and don't turn it out until you feel like it's as good as you can
Yeah.
get it.
So how much writing? What was the overlap between coming back into Salvation Army bands as a player and then as the conductor or whatever, and the composition for, like, you know, your general series entrance and your entries in the ensemble series? What
Um,
is there in that? What was the overlap on that before, you know, counter pieces started coming up before the band that you were playing with and you were conducting?
yeah, it started pretty much right away because the outside group I was conducting, Dominion Brass, for instance, Mighty Fortress started. I don't. I never finished it, but it started as a brass ensemble,
Hmm.
symphonic brass piece. That's kind of the way why it sounds the way it does,
Beautiful piece.
and it's a little more, it's a little more of a hybrid piece. It's got a little bit of a drum corps international, and it's a little brassier maybe than a brass band piece. So by the time I came back to the Army, I had written a fair amount for Dominion, probably 10 or 15 pieces, and
Mm.
so the first thing that happened was I began to transcribe some of those pieces for brass band, which wasn't very hard because a lot of them really sounded like brass band
Yeah.
pieces anyway, right?
So the foundations were there. You just had to
Yeah,
alter the
right.
wallpaper.
So and the way I usually write, as far as deciding, like with Dominion, the reason I started writing was because we had these kind of big pieces, because that group would do sacred and secular pieces. So you might have
Mm.
like a big uh, brass piece that was lengthy, like a symphony, or
Mm.
something. And then, but what you didn't have was like an offertory or a little first, second half opener or
Yeah.
something like that. And that's
Yeah.
where I slotted in with these little 3 or 4 minute pieces.
Hmm.
Like I think Mighty Fortress was probably going to be an opener for Dominion. It was like a razzmatazz, features all the sections. I like to do like what I call head turners. Group starts playing. This section is featured so that people look over here, and then here
Hmm.
now we'll turn
Yes.
on. You want to introduce everybody to the to the
Yeah.
audience. So I just started transcribing them, and then the same thing happened with the National Capital Band, where we would have, I'd pick the rep for the season, and typically the big pieces wouldn't be by me; they would be, all the pieces that we all love, and there'd be this, that, or the other. But we didn't have this particular, like for instance, nowadays contemporary Christian music, you really got to have a piece like that on
Really?
your concert. That's church people even don't know the hymns that are in our you
No.
know, hymn-based tunes, but they know, you know, whatever. They know.
You can say the reverse as well, because
Yes.
I'm with my father. I'm a member of the Hymn Society of the United Kingdom, and obviously that's multi-denominational. And you can go every month in the journals and in the newsletters, and you'll get hymns and songs that are in churches, ancient and modern, Methodist hymnal.
Right.
I've never even touched the Salvation Army songbook,
That's
and
right.
yet they are known by millions of people.
All over the world.
Unless you are a Salvationist that has been exposed to a lot of outside army church music.
Right.
I haven't. It,
Right.
it's almost two sides of a coin, isn't it?
Yeah. So when you program now, you have to do potpourri.
Yeah.
You have to try to hit those traditions. And sometimes, unfortunately, it means you can't do some army pieces because, like the National Capital Band probably plays more than 50% of its performances are in front of non-army
Hmm.
audiences at other churches and public, so you don't know what they know.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the hard part about programming now is there is no consensus. Everybody, outside of Amazing Grace, maybe, or something like that,
Yeah.
there's no hymn that everybody knows now. And
Oh.
so
Oh. Oh.
you try to hit a bunch of styles,
Yeah.
you got to put a jazz piece on there and a contemporary piece on there and a march and a hymn tune arrangement or whatever. And then you got to hit these sort of different veins of even church music. And one of them is contemporary Christian. So we're always going to have one or two of those
Yeah.
in our book. And there aren't sometimes there aren't that many. Or the ones that are there, let's say, for instance, in England, Graham Kendrick, you know, every tune he's ever written has been arranged by some Salvation Army person in Britain. Okay, but we only sing a percentage of those over here,
Yeah.
and sometimes we only know them because they're in pieces by composers from the UK,
Yeah.
right? Whereas we have a whole bunch of them over here that we do that you
Yeah.
guys probably don't know very well, or if you've heard them, maybe.
That's cultural, though, isn't it? That's all to do
Right.
with
Yeah.
where you are and who you are. I
Right.
mean,
And in particular, our territory is sort of the mother lode of the whole thing. I mean, the southern United States is the mother lode of pop music on the planet. You know, that's where it all.
Sorry,
not now.
have you heard of the Beatles and
No,
the
no, no.
Rolling Stones?
Yeah, but who did they listen to? They were all from Mississippi. Yeah. So I don't mean now. I mean the whole blues rock thing, you know, came out, and so did gospel church music, right? So it's really now, you know, it's been taken over by all over the planet and then spit back out in a better way. You know, like the Beatles is a good example of that, or even groups nowadays. But so anyway, to get back to why I picked it, so that's kind of how I think. So I usually end up doing the pieces that we don't have something for. You know,
Yeah.
You know, the Salvation Army's got 5,000 marches published. I've written a couple marches, but I don't. You know, normally I can find a march that suits us, that's published, that's got a tune in it most people know. But there's little slots where we don't, or some tune that's special to our area or our region. We don't have that arranged, so I'll end up doing that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at your index, and most of it, you know, it was a pleasant surprise to see it was a scripture based, and the ensemble is sort of primarily what's published at the moment. Even though
That's right.
You, as a composer, you've probably got, you know, boxes full of stuff that have never reached the publisher's desk yet. But I think when I was listening to the music, the euphonium solo for It's No Longer I That Liveth came on. You don't really hear choruses used that are sung prolifically. Like you'll normally have the complete song will be used.
That's right.
How important to you is it as a composer that if you feel you've got this tune in your brain, or someone said, "Can I have a euphonium solo?" or such and such? How do you distinguish that by saying, "Okay, I know that there are 25 other versions of that we could play"? You know, alluding to the fact that, hang on, I need a march that's got Onward Christian Soldiers. Hang on a minute, why don't I just use number 777 in the general series rather than write a new counter march? So when you have to write a new piece or arrange, how do you individualize it?
Well, I really like an assignment. So every one of those AIS pieces that's in there, they send you a thing and they say, arrange this tune at this level. I like that. I don't, you know, it's actually easier for me to have the limitation of whatever it is, you know. And actually the first published pieces are all AIS. After I had written maybe 2 or 3 years after I came back, then the territory started asking me to write, you know, a couple of these or a year or whatever. And so then I feel like, well, they've picked it, and they send you, you know, the tune to work from. Like, this is the version we're using, you know, and then you decide sort of on the style, especially a tune like that one, you know, or you could have done a lot of different things with that particular tune. So sometimes it'll, you know, I'll say, oh, this might make a good swing tune. That to me is you know, I No Longer I That Liveth is what I would call a Sunday school tune. To me, it's just straight ahead, clap your hands, opening exercises, you know, kind of tune, and that's sort of the direction. Plus, you know, it couldn't be too hard. I think that's a grade 3, so you got to kind of watch your P's and Q's as far as getting out of hand. Now with the I've ended up kind of being the contemporary Christian music guy in that series. If you look at that list,
Father's Love, I Will Sing of My Redeemer.
Yes, a lot of them are power ballads.
Yes, you know, they're very, very memorable titles.
Yeah, so they, you know, I guess because I had been writing these horn charts to those same tunes, which some of those horn chart licks show up in the AIS ring. I just
Mhm.
steal from myself. So those I don't tend to do too much too, because I feel like they're so recent in people's memory. They're still singing them, so
Yeah,
they're
okay.
probably not interested yet in hearing, another kind of version of this, like
Yeah,
the
it's
reggae
almost
version,
burnout time.
whatever, right? They just kind of want it's like a quasi transcription. I mean, you can do a few little things to it, but they kind of want it straight ahead. Maybe 20 years from now, some of those same tunes, people will begin to deconstruct them
Hmm.
and do some different, like they do with older,
Yeah.
hymn tunes now. Yeah. So I really, I probably haven't started that many pieces in the last decades of my own volition. I mean, believe it or I mean, I just,
Yeah.
it'll be like the cat band needs a piece, needs this kind of piece or this kind of tune. AIS says write this. Nick Simmons Smith says territorial band's playing this at commissioning. We need something, or
Fires up on
whatever,
music
and I
behind.
just go in that slot, which I find in a way easier. I mean, having to pick um, might once in a while. I'll just decide I really like that tune. I'm going to do it. But basically, they're all, and that's actually exactly like my dad. I don't know if he hardly ever wrote a single piece of music that was of his own. It was always somebody saying, "We need a youth council's course," or "We need a musical for commissioning," or
Yeah.
whatever, and he just filled the commission basically.
Is it just because of the way it's been regimented and it's evolved in your life that people just come and say, I need a grade 4 piece, I need a grade 2 piece, and it's almost like, yes, you're a go-to writer, say we need a grade 2 piece, or we need, I tell you what, Steve, can you do, yes, I can do that.
Yeah,
And you're,
that's right. I mean,
but
once you do a few of them and they come out okay, then they trust you because they know you're going to be. First of all, I'm usually almost always on time, which is a big deal, because
yes,
a lot of composers aren't as far as turning things in. So that makes it easier on the leader, if you have the piece early and people can. And then they've turned out I would say their service, they're useful. This is my word that I like to use.
yeah,
Useful. It's useful, something like that.
playable, it's, yeah,
It fits the bill. Um, and I don't care that if it's occasional music. Now, of course, I like it to be something that can be played,
yeah,
again after whatever event. And most of the time they are. Sometimes because the fact that I have my own band to conduct every week usually means it can. So even if I do something for territorial band or for some other division or whatever, I know we're probably going to be able to use it. We're going to get a lot of uses
it's really interesting. 'Cause, I
out of it.
mean, I think it's almost reverse, because a lot of composers would start out with the small bands and the YP bands and the
Yeah.
octets and just, but you look at them, and then 5, 10 years down the line, they want to write bigger and better and sort of explore
Yeah.
their own creativity. And with you, I get the sense of you're perfectly happy to standardize the hymn tunes for that particular grade and say, look,
Yeah.
I can do that. I can slot that in. You want that by X date? Yes, that's doable. And say, you know what? The New York Staff Band wants a 10-minute epic based on
No.
Hart and Lee.
No. Well, first of all, like even in our own territory, we have composer Andrew Wainwright,
Yeah,
Joel Collier.
yeah.
We have people that write what I would call staff band style pieces, and they really love doing it, and they're good at it. Uh, I The trouble with staff band pieces is only staff bands can play them because they don't, the bands like ISB or New York Staff, they kind of run into a problem. They really can't play regular Salvation Army music, or not too much of it, because they just have too much band, and even the scoring doesn't sound quite right. Because when you're scoring for a core band, you know, there's a certain amount of safety scoring involved. You're making sure a part's covered.
Hmm.
When a staff band plays that, the balances will be all, the bandmaster will have to adjust everything down because second cornet in the ISB is blowing his brains out on a part that you didn't think was going to have somebody on it that could do that, right? So the music sort of doesn't. They need harder music, and they should have it. They have a band like this, and the kind of ministry they do, it's just a different kind of thing than what.
Yeah, but would it be something you sort of, if you, I mean, as a composer, I mean, you have limitations that you can settle to, but the challenge is saying, okay, the Southern Territorial Band wants a big piece, and you said, do you know what, I really fancy having a crack at that, or
Yeah,
not. That's not your meter. That's not your thing.
I would do it, even if Nick wanted to do that. And I have a couple of longer. I have like one variations piece that's about 11 minutes. It's still broken into 5 little movements. I've never written a tone poem. Um, I don't. I'm not even sure I could. But even if I could,
Oh, sure
I
you
don't.
could. Yeah, I
This
mean,
is something that I talk about all the time with Andrew and Joel and Andy
mm,
Barrington and Nick and every other guy that writes or girl and Dorothy.
yeah.
I don't know. No, she's written some really long
I'm
ones.
hopefully speaking to her tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes. I the trouble now is, can you name me 3 tunes that everybody knows? Because that's how many you got to have for a lengthy piece. And I don't know. I just don't know what those are. So to me now, when for the band people like you and me, we can listen to an Eric Ball piece from the '30s. We know all those tunes because we've been playing that
Yeah,
piece. Nobody, the majority of our listeners over here in America, in
yeah.
our territory, just it's unless you've got a screen up or you have somebody narrating or something,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it just it's just pure music, which can be fine. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think people just we live in a phone society, so 13 minutes Holy War. I don't know if people can stick with it that aren't that really don't
Interesting.
understand. I mean, I love, 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 love that music, and of course, I've stolen, like we all have, from all those people. I don't even consider it stealing. It's almost like a tribute,
Yeah,
to them to use little snippets and stuff. Um, but I just for what we're doing now, if I don't know, and it's so much work. I mean, those pieces take a long time, even for people that are way more talented than me. And I just noticed over the years, even people that started off writing some longer pieces, like Bill Himes, they tapered down over the years. They adjusted to this new
yeah.
reality that you couldn't even say what tunes all Salvationists in your territory knew anymore.
God
It was
damn.
very hard to link, like you would do, like RSA would do, just he'd have 10 tunes in a thing, little snippets, and everybody would get it because they were in London at Royal Albert Hall at a Salvation Army Congress, and they knew all the tunes.
Mm,
And of course, it had an awesome impact, and it still does if you know them. But
yeah.
for my reality, first of all, I don't even. I'm not like I say. I'm not even sure I could do it, but for the amount of work it takes, and who can play it, I start every piece at Triumph series scoring, and then if it blows up, it blows up. It gets out of
Yeah.
hand, and I have to switch because I want some core bands. I'd rather have 500 bands play an easier piece than 10 bands play my magnum opus.
Interesting.
Basically, yeah.
I mean, it sounds like you've really got yourself into a comfortable thing, not through the lack of lethargy or laziness, but from a practical reality by saying, look, yes, I could take 3 months to do this epic poem, but in that time, I could pump out 10 pieces
That's
for
right.
10 core bands that would be
That's
used
right.
50 times more. And,
Right.
I feel that would be more beneficial of my time. So it's a
Right.
really interesting aspect to hear a composer almost say, what, it's not for the lack of the Lord going, come on, pick up your boots, get on with it.
Right. No,
It's
I'm writing. I'm writing pretty
practical reality.
consistently. It's probably the same amount of hours, but it just ends up making 3 little pieces. Plus, in my job, I'm an assistant divisional music director, so uh,
Oh, have we lost?
stuff at the same time. So
Oh, you're back
now
now.
I do have a limited amount the amount of time I can do it.
Okay.
So
Who are your?
But I'm not saying I'll never do it. And believe me, I've discussed this exact topic with Andy Barrington. Now, Andrew Wainwright, he does do these, but he's pretty much writing full time now. Um, he has kind of an online teaching business and he's actually taking real commissions. Um, and he really, he loves the movie music, so he puts a lot of that, kind of like Peter Graham, puts a lot of the movie style stuff, which is great, and it's super listenable. And that's even good for an outside audience, a non-religious audience, because they recognize those sounds, those kind of John Williams-ish sounds or whatever. But I'm a little more, and I'm older than those guys. I'm not gonna. It's not like young men write. The people who have written.
It's fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, the people who write these big pieces. If you look at when Stedman Allen or Les Condon or Ken Downey, they wrote their first giant piece when they were 19. I mean, that's what they want. Even back to Eric Ball. I mean, this is.
I think he was doing it in the cradle, Eric Ball.
You innovate when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you kind of, that's when you hit your. Now, I didn't write a note until I was 40, so maybe my horizons weren't quite that wide or whatever. But you never know. Something could come up, and I'll need to write some bigger piece, and we'll see what happens.
Interesting. What's the most unusual place you've ever heard of your music being played? Because I've had Romania and South Korea and Zimbabwe. Yeah. I mean, in these days of international communications, you switch your computer on in your phone and you get an email from Kathmandu. We played "Oh Church Arise" in the service this morning. It went down really well.
Yeah, right. So, well, I got maybe a month ago. I don't remember who sent this to me. Somebody sent me a link. It was a group rehearsing in, I think it was in Nigeria. Looked like a youth band, like maybe a divisional youth band or something. Well, could have been a core. It was big youth band. And they were playing this manuscript march called Greater Things that I actually wrote for our territorial band. And a
good march, by the way.
Yeah, it turned out, that's Triumph Series.
Yep.
That was a good example of a limit. So the corps officer, it was an anniversary piece for the Tampa, Florida Corps, which is the corps my parents grew up in. So I had quite the, emotional connection to it. And he said, the theme is just getting started. So it's 125th anniversary, but we're just getting started. So I thought, well, greater things. That's it. Those words, even greater things. And then I asked my parents, hey, what's a song you sang when you were a kid in the Tampa Corps? And they said, Christ is the Answer. We sang it every Sunday night. It was sort of our, So I turned a 6/8 tune into a 4/4 tune, of course. I straightened it out. But but the corps officer also said, I want our corps band to be able to play this. So write it for the territorial band, but don't make it where we can't play it. That helps me quite a bit, just to size it down, know what I'm up against, who's going to play. And it still sounded nice with the big man. So I saw this band in Africa. I don't even know how they got the music, and I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. So they did it. And then maybe 2 weeks ago, the Texas Divisional, one of their youth bands, did a virtual version of it, where they had all recorded their part in their house, same march. So yeah, that's probably about it. But I'll just hear from time to time. Nick told me that. So I have a band arrangement, Triumph Series, of my dad's tune "All for Thee," right, which our territorial band played. We rehearsed at Chelmsford when we were in England. Okay, a couple years ago. They now use that as like their core band, sort of. I don't know what I forget. Their bandmaster said it was like to become sort of their theme piece or something. Signature. Yeah, like the. So it's great. I mean, that's one of the things I really love. I was basically only a player for 25 or 30 years, and I really loved doing that. But the best thing about writing is you put the work in. It's very concentrated. It's an hour per bar, but then the thing can just go everywhere, and people are using it, and they find it useful. You don't even know they're doing it, it's nice when you hear they're doing it because it's like, oh,
Hmm.
well, okay, that's nice that it went, and actually all for the I should be getting approved pretty soon from SPNS because I think that's coming out this summer. I can't remember. Uh,
Let's hope it's still on the books to do so.
yeah, I don't even
Yep.
know what they're doing. I guess I need to write Andrew Blythe and figure out, what the what the plan is now.
Well, he's answering emails. I know that much.
Yeah,
I
I
had a
haven't
very
really
lovely
bothered.
email from the other day. So,
Yeah, there's a couple in the pipeline. I only started sending pieces in maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The first one was Mighty Fortress,
mm,
and All for Thee is coming, and another march called Joyful Warrior, which was written actually as a tribute march to Jim Anderson. We renamed our conservatory building at camp after him, and the march was written for him. So there are some, but as you know, that's a long. At my age, I'll probably be more published posthumously than, than while I'm alive because
no, no, no,
it
no.
takes a long time. Now we have our own Southern series now, so which is nice. So we put 8 pieces out. A lot of territories are doing this now,
No.
so it's not quite the log jam, And if they don't like it or can't use it in London, then you just get it back and send it somewhere
Somebody
else.
else will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because you get some. I mean, David Evans said that he'd had pieces that he naturally submitted to London, and they went no, and then New York rang up and said, "Have you still got that piece of music? Because I think
Yeah.
that would fit really well, and because it's different culture and different ethos, and like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
I
really
kind of want to
interesting."
take the like I want to take the kind of I wouldn't even call it rejection. It's just the pieces I send over to Andrew are ones that I think to me they just sound like typical Triumph series,
Hmm.
like Greater Things. That sounds like an Salvation Army march. I sort of quasi tried to imitate a little less Condon Triumph series style and a little bit because it was an anniversary march. I wanted it to sort of skew back a little
Mm,
bit, if that
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
And so that one I'll probably send over there because to me it just sounds like a lot of other Triumph
yeah.
series marches. But then there are pieces either like some of the contemporary Christian ones where I'm pretty sure you guys don't sing it over there. I don't send those over there. I just publish them in the South or
Yeah.
send them to Dorothy or whatever or somebody that you know where it makes more sense. So it's nice now because you don't like years ago when my dad was young, there was really only 1 or 2 games in town. I mean,
Yeah.
you send it over. He got several vocal pieces published, but I don't know, he had sort of a bad experience with Charlie Skinner on brass band pieces, and so he just never sent any more of them over, which is a shame. Some of them are being published now. Actually, New
Mm,
York is about to publish one that's 50 years old. That's actually been played all over the world now.
yeah.
So it's more just to like horses for
You do find
courses.
that, don't you? You find pieces of music being played since the year dot, and no
Yeah,
one's actually ever. You mean this isn't a Salvation Army
yeah,
publication?
right.
He was
That's
a
right.
Salvation Army officer for 50 years. He was in
Yeah,
the
I know.
spiritual
Yeah.
staff band for 25 years, and
Yes, it was. Yeah.
played trombone solos like they came out of the. Yeah. What's your favourite? What was the last time that you heard a piece of music, not necessarily by yourself, a piece of music, a Salvation Army piece of music that really moved you?
The first time,
The most recent.
um, wow. Actually, a couple, a piece by Andrew Wainwright called "The Vow," which was written for his own wedding.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially the processional of his wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and it's based on "All That I Am," the Bill Himes
Yep.
course. It sounds like Elgar. It's a
Really? Oh,
beautiful,
that's
yeah. And I have
oh,
not. Our territorial band it's actually coming out right now. Our latest recording. It's on that.
oh, good. I'll have to get that.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful piece, and it's probably 6 minutes long, or it's not. Uh, and I've had our territorial band's been playing it for 2 or 3 years, and there's been many occasions I could not make it through it. Like
Yeah.
I had to stop.
Take a
Um,
breather. Yeah.
it's just a beautiful piece. Of course, the tune. I love the tune. I love Bill. I love Andrew, for that matter.
Yeah.
So you put it all together, and it just gets a little overwhelming. So yeah, for recently, um, that's probably it. The way in our territorial band now, we kind of play an in-house show. I mean, it's pretty much our composer. When we went
Yeah,
to England, we play well. We played Triumph of Peace. I think sort of our, I don't know what you
yeah.
would call it.
I remember when you came to England. When I spoke to Nick a little while ago, and he said that was the. He ended up, I was at Chelmsford, and he said that was the piece when about a third of the band went down because they all had too many ice creams.
Yes. Yeah, we had.
A few sickness bugs because they wanted to gorge themselves on British Cadbury's chocolate ice
Well, that
cream.
went on. It went on all week. I mean, even when we left and we went over to, I can't remember the court. Was it Staines or something? We stopped on our way down to the coast and did a program with the Black Dyke trombone guys, which is great. But we were Joel Kyer, my stand partner. He soloed that night. He was not well, and even during the concert, he was having to kind of go in and out. And right when the thing ended, he was standing down by the altar, like 1 minute after the program ended, and then just whoosh.
Whoa!
It was on the altar.
Not the kind of impression you want to do, but thank the Lord.
No. I mean, he played great. I can't believe he even did. Yeah, so we've kind of got that in that band. We've kind of got this thing going now where we're pretty much writing our own music, which just heightens the emotional component of it for the band. I mean, because you're playing like we're playing Joel's piece, and I'm sitting next to Joel, who's my friend and my stand partner, and it's just, same thing. Andy Barrington playing his piece. I used to babysit Andy when he was a 3-year-old, right? And Andrew Wainwright and Nick, and we've had there's Kevin Downing, who's back in the trombone section. A guy I literally held like this when his parents.
That's a name I haven't heard of for a while. Kevin Downing.
Yeah. So it's just, it kind of just adds a whole nother dimension to it, and then maybe that's why those pieces move me, just because I mean I like the pieces and I know them very well because we premiered them, and I know the people, and I'm literally sitting next to the people sometimes, so it's really a cool.
You've never been tempted to sort of go, "What the heck did you write that for?"
Right? No, you don't really. It does personalize it more than it would if it was just a composer from overseas, or when I was a kid, all composers were overseas, almost.
Yes.
They're all
in London.
Deities up on the side of Mount Rushmore, and they would come over to our TMI, and we would, they all had a British accent, and, all that.
Nothing wrong with the British accent,
No, it actually made them a lot more. Speaking of which, I just came across this awesome Les Condon thing at Star Lake, which you probably have heard, where if you haven't, I'll try to forward it to you. He does like a demonstration concert on Present Age with the Star Lake Band. It's back in the early 70s. And they play it section by section. So he introduces the first section. I'll dig it up. I'll send it to you. It's fantastic.
Only time I've ever heard anything like that was when the New York Staff Band released the recording of him introducing Easter Glory.
Yes, that's similar to that. It's similar to that, but it's longer. It's probably... it might be an hour. It's a whole night program at camp. You can actually hear the crickets. It's an open-sided, thing, and so it's really great. The introduction that he gives is great, and then he plays the top. Dun, 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 dun. He plays for maybe a minute or two, and he says, "Now this is what this is." He literally tells you.
So, and this is a recording you've got from.
Yeah, somebody sent it to me. They have, apparently the Eastern Territory did this with almost all their guests for a period of time, where they had this.
They had profiles, didn't they?
Yeah, they're kind of like similar to what the profiles they do in New York, except this would just be, one, like an hour program. And in this particular case, it was just one piece because it was a longer piece. And it's super, and he's such a man. He is.
I never met him. I was only 4 years old when he died, but.
Yeah, he's, I mean, he's a gifted speaker on top of all the other gifts that he has. I mean, it's just so well
I'll tell his
thought
daughter that
out.
because I know she'd enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's so encouraging. I mean, basically the whole idea was to encourage the young people at that time. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Lovely man.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so I sent it out to a bunch of people when I got it, and somehow that drifted over to his daughter and son-in-law
Mm,
who run his that website that
trust.
he's
Yeah.
on, and they said, "Oh, thank you for sending this out," and all. And it was really super nice. But I know I'm getting off track. But
Yeah. No. No.
you tell
Right.
I'm a Les Condon fan.
Oh, join the club.
Yeah.
My retired bandmaster sort of grew up with him at national music schools in the UK. So the music of Les Condon is a very well-known subject in my life
Yeah.
because you play things like Bognor Regis and,
Yes.
you know, even Blythe Heritage, Splendor of Youth. Yeah,
Yes. The middle movement.
just, you know.
It's fantastic.
So
Yeah.
hey, let's get back to the music, Steve Kellner. So yeah, sort of the last 24 hours, what sort of been on the playlist in your Salvation Army songs repertoire that sort of keeps coming back to you as
Hmm.
as the current favourite of the day?
Uh, that's a good question. I've kind of been in well, the only thing I've been writing lately, which is affecting my listening, of course, is more horn charts because we've been doing a weekly Wednesday night worship webcast to our division.
Yep.
So a bunch of us meet over at a core across the river. I'm in an area where two states in the District of Columbia come together. So I go over to Virginia, and we have a 10-piece praise band sort of spread out. We're all socially distancing, but there's a horn section. So I've just been writing for that. I guess I haven't been thinking too much about, you know, Salvation Army songs lately. I do have this is a little bit on the subject. I kind of have when I came back to the Army, uh, one of the things that struck me was that we weren't maybe as Army as we were when I was
Yeah.
a kid. Like I felt like we probably could use a little bit more quasi-military. Like I think there was a time in the late, maybe the 80s and 90s when we sort of felt like maybe the whole Army thing wasn't somehow relevant to modern culture. So we sort of tried to get a little bit more with what other churches
Mm-hmm.
were doing, which I don't think is a great idea. I don't think you can run from your DNA. So when I came back, this is very strange because I'm not a rah rah guy. I'm not a fist pumper or a
Mm-hmm.
shouter or anything. But I grew up in some chorus like Atlanta Temple where we sang all the old Army songs.
Yeah.
We had Sunday night salvation meetings, and
Mm-hmm.
I know them all.
Yeah.
And I notice now nobody below a certain age. So I've been kind of writing this series of medleys, what I call war song medleys,
Oh,
and they're
interesting.
thematic.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of them is called Army on the March, so it's all the marching
Mm.
songs. They're all from one little section of the songbook, which made it into the new songbook. They didn't eliminate them. And then another one is I have one on flags, follow the flag, all the flag songs. I can't remember. There's two or three other ones. Anyway, so I have a little bit of a mission. I think about those songs all the time. I just feel
Okay.
like we got to kind of keep. Like I'm fine with contemporary Christian songs coming into our songbook. It's fine, whatever. And of course, I like to sing what I would say the great hymns of the church, a lot of which aren't Army, but
Yeah.
are common universal church heritage. But I feel like that war song section is critical. I don't think the Army can. It's got to be itself. You
Mm.
can't run from your heritage. It doesn't really work for us to be like everybody else because there wouldn't be any reason.
Okay, just for a reason. So
Yeah, you don't need an army. If you're going to call yourself an army and have ranks and call everything by a strange name, then just do it. Just do it and sing these crazy war fighting songs, which I know are way out of fashion with the mainline churches in some cases. I feel like that stuff is important to pass along the kind of culture and enthusiasm. You need those when you're doing the kind of work the Army does, which is hard work. you know, at least in our area, you're working with the lower socioeconomic level. It's tough. It's a grind.
Mm.
You need war songs, just like any military. You know, I was in the military. We
Yeah,
had our songs.
I can,
We
I
had
can see
we had
where
the Marines hymn.
this is going from.
Marines sing the Marines hymn. The toughest, the roughest, toughest dudes in the world. Okay, or some of them. United States Marines, British Marines.
Yeah.
They have their songs and they cry when they sing them. You
Yes.
know, these are some tough dudes, but
Yeah.
they can't do what they do without that stuff in them. You know,
Yeah.
that's the culture of it. So I feel, so I don't have any one specific song that's sort of been going around, but I do think about those, Salvation Army, Army of God. You know, it's something those do get to me. Even though I'm a low key guy, and I'm never gonna throw my head back and go like this, probably. But I
You
need
do
those
realise that
songs.
when you do that, that's going to be fun. He said he'd never do that. We've got the evidence.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, I might, and I used to. I feel the same way about people who are really good platform people, who are upbeat. I used to kind of make fun of them, but I realize now a low key person like that, like me, needs those people. They need me too because everything can't be rah rah. Once in a while, you got to think something through, right? So. But you do need that, and I think we need those songs in our regular
Nice to hear
diet.
that.
Yeah.
So what's the favourite Bible quote that's on the fridge magnet at the moment, if you had to have one? Is there a particular verse that sort of hits the mark occasionally, and when you're getting the milk out of the fridge, that's the thing on the magnet?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of one I've read recently. Uh, I do this. My daily Bible reading is one of these, 4-part things. It's up here. It's in Numbers right now,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm in Isaiah, and then
Mm-hmm.
I think Second John now. Yeah, I don't know if I really have a. I don't know if I really have a favorite.
It
I mean,
doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
they're all. Yeah, I just.
A lot of people have quoted my mother's favourite, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path."
Yeah,
Because
yeah, or
that gives me every time.
consider others above yourself. That's Nick's. I like that verse very, very much too. Consider others better than you. I like those verses. Those are the verses you really need to concentrate on and try to keep yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I'm a little bit more of a generalist. I just, the way the Bible affects me is just, it's just a bellwether, it's like, especially now with all the kind of crazy
Mm-hmm.
stuff going on, just to have 20 minutes just to, like for instance, I'm in Isaiah now, and he is reading in the riot act about what's about to happen, right? And
So you could
those
go in the
people,
street corner and do
yeah,
yourself. But hang
those
on.
people had problems. Like we got a problem right now, but not that kind of problem. They're about to be destroyed. They're about to be hauled off to Babylon, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, worse things than what we're going through. So it just kind of calms me down if I start the day with that, and I just let the Lord do whatever, because that system is so randomized. You're just getting a little here. Usually, one little phrase will stick out or something, just like,
Yes.
yeah, this is what I need today. Just some little something just to keep me.
Which is what God does so well.
Yeah, He's great at it.
I said, I know what you need. But I'm gonna pray with you, and
Okay.
as always, as you feel comfortable staying in space, dancing around the room, as you wish. Dear Lord, yet again, the wonderful privilege of being able to share with Christians around the world. And I thank you for the ministry and spirituality of Steve and his family, his passion for you, his real awareness of his spiritual gift and the practical day-to-dayness that can entail. And the fact that, Lord, that he is very keen that what he has is made useful in the best possible way. And we thank you, Lord, that you have bestowed this gift of composition and arranging. We thank you, Lord, for all the musical genres that you have given him to be exposed to during his life, and the people that have encouraged and guided and mentored him, and the people that he guides and mentors through his music, through his ministry, through his Christian living, through the people he talks to in the street corner, in the supermarket. And for those people that want to find out, like myself, where did that piece of music come? It's a Steve Kellner piece. You know, there is a quality there that's unique to him. And because it's unique to you, Lord, because the glory goes to you, and we strive as musicians and composers to make sure that we recognize the authority of Jesus, and that the love of Jesus that is so wonderful flows through his work and is essentialized to everything he does. So I just thank him for his time, his ministry, his passion, his family and friends, his love for you, his continued service in the Salvation Army and all the Christian groups that he comes into contact with, and for those people that come into the knowledge of Jesus Christ because they heard a Kellner piece, Lord, a real blessing. But I pray for him now, Lord, and for the future, for the compositions that will come, and for all the abilities and standards that he will try to seek to uphold personally and professionally, Lord. And for all the people that he will come into contact with, all the young people and youth groups, and maybe those senior people who are retiring that need to awaken a new challenge or a new part of their life in retirement, Lord. It's not just young people that seek the Lord. And I think sometimes we do forget that. So I pray for Steve and his family, and that you will continue to uphold him in your hands and continue to bless him in that unique way. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother.